Something strange just happened in Formula One. Today was the first day of the 2026 season in Australia. The first real laps, the first real data. And Ferrari just revealed something that could change the entire championship. Because after watching Lewis Hamilton drive the SF-26 for the first time in a real race weekend, Fred Vasseur said something that immediately made rival teams nervous. Not excited, nervous. Here is the crazy part. In the very first session of the season, Ferrari finished first and second, Leclerc on top, Hamilton right behind him, and the car looked terrifyingly stable through Albert Park's fastest corners. But that is not the real story. The real story is what Ferrari discovered in the data after the runs. Because according to early analysis, the SF-26 may have one of the strongest acceleration packages on the entire grid. And if that advantage is real, it could decide overtakes, race starts, and even championships. But here is where everything gets serious. Fred Vasseur hinted that Lewis Hamilton is already unlocking the car's real pace on the very first day, something that normally takes drivers several races to achieve. And if that is true, Ferrari may have just created the most dangerous driver pairing in Formula One. Hamilton, Leclerc, one car that might finally be ready to fight for a title. But there's one detail from today in Melbourne that almost nobody noticed. A detail in the SF-26 that explains why Ferrari suddenly looks so fast. And once you see it, the entire paddock reaction makes sense. So before we break it all down, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because what happened today in Australia might be the beginning of something huge. Everyone expected the first day of the season to answer one simple question. Who is actually fast in 2026? But when the cars rolled out in Melbourne this morning, something unusual happened almost immediately. The Ferrari looked calm, not nervous, not unpredictable, calm. That may sound like a small detail, but in modern Formula One, it means everything. Because Albert Park is not an easy circuit for a new car. The track is semi-permanent. Grip evolves every lap, and the fast direction changes punish any weakness in the rear of the car. If the balance is not perfect, the driver feels it instantly. And yet from the very first laps of free practice one, the SF-26 looked planted through those sections. Especially in the rapid sequence between the high-speed corners where stability matters most. Onboard cameras showed something interesting. Lewis Hamilton was not fighting the car. No corrections on corner exit. No sudden snaps of oversteer. Just smooth inputs. Brake, turn, accelerate, again and again. And that is when engineers across the paddock began to look closer at the telemetry. Because the Ferrari is built around one very aggressive technical philosophy. Everything on the car is designed to maximize airflow under the floor and through the diffuser. The side pods are extremely compact. The rear packaging is incredibly tight. And the power unit itself uses a combustion architecture capable of operating at extremely high pressures compared to traditional layouts. Why does that matter? Because when that system works correctly, something very important happens. The rear of the car becomes stable during acceleration. And when the rear stays stable, the driver can attack earlier on corner exit, which leads to better traction, which leads to faster acceleration. And on circuits like Albert Park, that advantage multiplies every single lap. But here is where things become more interesting. Ferrari did not arrive in Australia with the same car they tested in Bahrain. The version running in Melbourne is already in evolution. Small adjustments to the floor, refined diffuser airflow, subtle aerodynamic tweaks designed to expand the operating window of the car. In simple terms, Ferrari is trying to transform an extremely aggressive concept into something drivers can trust over an entire race distance. And on Friday, it looked like it was working. Charles Leclerc immediately pushed the car to the top of the timing sheet in free practice one. A 1 minute 20.267 lap. Fast enough to put Ferrari first. But what surprised observers even more was the name sitting directly behind him. Lewis Hamilton, second place, in his first real Formula One weekend with Ferrari. And this is where the story becomes much bigger than a single practice session. Because adapting to a completely new car usually takes time. Different steering feedback, different braking behavior, different energy deployment. Even the cockpit environment feels different. Drivers normally spend several race weekends learning those details. But Hamilton looked comfortable almost immediately, which raises a fascinating question. What did Ferrari see in the data after those laps? Because later in the day, during the second practice session, the order on the timing screen changed slightly. McLaren appeared very strong. Oscar Piastri jumped to the top with a rapid lap. Mercedes also looked competitive, but Ferrari did not disappear. Both Leclerc and Hamilton remained inside the leading group, and their long-run pace looked incredibly consistent. Lap after lap, the same rhythm, the same stability, which is exactly the kind of behavior engineers love to see on the first day of a season. Because one fast lap can come from many things: low fuel, aggressive engine modes, perfect track timing, but consistent long runs reveal the true character of the car. And the SF-26 looked disciplined, controlled, predictable, and that is precisely the word Lewis Hamilton used when he described the Ferrari earlier this week. Discipline, not chaos, not unpredictability. Discipline, meaning the car rewards precision. If the driver works with the balance, the performance appears. But if the driver pushes beyond that window, the car can quickly become difficult. And that detail is crucial, because it explains something Fred Vasseur said after the session that very few people noticed at first. He hinted that Hamilton was already beginning to understand how to operate the car within that window on the very first day, which sounds simple, but inside Formula One, that kind of adaptation speed can change an entire season. Because if Hamilton truly unlocks the Ferrari early, and if Leclerc continues delivering his usual raw speed, Ferrari suddenly has something every championship team needs: two drivers capable of extracting the full potential of a very complex machine. But there is still one major question nobody in the paddock can answer yet. A question that will only become clear when the lights go out on Sunday. Is the SF-26 simply quick over a few laps? Or has Ferrari quietly built the most complete race car on the grid? Because the data from today in Melbourne hints at something even bigger. Something related to the way this car accelerates. And if those numbers are real, several teams may already be in serious trouble. But hidden inside the Friday data, there's a detail that almost nobody outside the teams noticed. And it might explain why Fred Vasseur sounded so calm after the sessions. Because when engineers started analyzing the numbers from Albert Park, one metric immediately stood out: acceleration. Not top speed, not cornering. Acceleration. From slow corners, from medium speed exits, from the exact moments where drivers begin to deploy power and electrical energy together. And this is where the SF-26 may have something very special. Early telemetry comparisons suggest the Ferrari launches incredibly hard out of traction zones. The car simply gets up to speed faster. And that advantage is not random. It comes directly from the way Ferrari designed the entire rear section of the car. The engine architecture allows extremely high combustion pressures. That means more efficient power delivery. At the same time, the compact turbo and tight rear packaging allow engineers to create very narrow side pods and a powerful airflow channel toward the diffuser. All of that works together to produce something drivers immediately feel: grip when they accelerate. And when grip and power arrive at the same moment, the car explodes forward. Now imagine that advantage repeated across an entire race. Corner exit after corner exit, lap after lap. Suddenly the picture becomes clear. A car that accelerates better can attack earlier, defend more easily, stay inside DRS range without destroying its battery. And that last detail may be the most important of all, because in the new regulation era, energy management is everything. Drivers must constantly decide when to deploy electrical power and when to save it. A car that wastes energy defending position becomes vulnerable later in the lap. But if the Ferrari can maintain strong acceleration without draining its battery too early, it gives Hamilton and Leclerc something extremely valuable: strategic freedom. They can choose when to attack and when to wait. That is exactly the kind of weapon Lewis Hamilton has used throughout his career. Pressure, constant pressure, staying close, saving energy, then striking when the opportunity appears. Which brings us back to Fred Vasseur's statement. Because after watching Hamilton complete multiple runs in the SF-26, Vasseur hinted that the British driver was already learning how to manage that balance between performance and discipline. In other words, Hamilton is not simply driving the car. He is already studying how to use it over an entire race. And that realization changes the conversation inside the paddock. Because if Hamilton learns to exploit the Ferrari's acceleration advantage, and if Leclerc continues extracting the car's raw speed over one lap, Ferrari suddenly becomes dangerous in two completely different ways: qualifying pace and race management. Two weapons, two very different drivers. One car designed to maximize both. But there is still a layer of complexity that very few fans are talking about. because the same aggressive concept that creates this incredible acceleration could also introduce a serious risk. A narrow performance window, small changes in temperature, tiny setup mistakes, even minor wind shifts around Albert Park. Any of these variables could move the car outside its ideal operating range. And when that happens, the stability drivers felt today could disappear very quickly. This is why both Hamilton and Leclerc sounded cautious when speaking to the media after practice. Neither driver declared Ferrari the favorite. Neither driver celebrated the timing sheets. Instead, both emphasized something very different: control, discipline, patience, because they know the real story of this weekend has not been written yet. Friday is data, Saturday is pressure, Sunday is truth, and there is one final detail about the SF-26 that could decide everything in Melbourne. A technical element inside the rear of the car that some engineers believe might be the real secret behind Ferrari's pace. A detail that could explain why rival teams spent so much time staring at the Ferrari in the pit lane today. And once that detail becomes clear, the reaction from the rest of the grid might make a lot more sense.